Hi everybody, it's Priscilla here from Sew with Stitches. Today I want to show you how I made this market bag. To start off, we're going to cast on with waste yarn on the Addi king size knitting machine. So when you join on your main color, you're going to want to leave a longer tail than I did. And I'm tying a very loose knot here, tying the waste yarn to the main yarn. We're going to knit 15 rows. So that was 15 rows. Now don't cut your yarn, but take it out from the yarn feeder and knit a row as if you're going to cast off, but don't let the stitches fall off. When you get all the way around to the beginning of the row again, put the yarn back in the yarn feeder. Now every odd hook number you want to flick back down under the needle. Every even hook you want to let the yarn fall off the back of the needle. Be careful not to split any stitches. So I made it all the way back around, and I'm going to do one row slowly to make sure I don't drop anything inadvertently. And I also just reset the counter, so we want to do 5 rows. So that was 5 more rows of knitting. Now we're going to do the handle rows. So I'm counting 6 hooks. I'm going to cut off my main yarn and switch back to waste yarn and just knit 10 more stitches with the waste yarn. You can see here I'm not going to tie the waste yarn and the main yarn together. I want to be able to pull out the waste yarn later. So that was 10. Now I'm switching back to my main color. Again, I'm not going to tie it to the waste yarn. And from here I'm going to do 13 stitches. Now I'm switching back to waste yarn for another 10 stitches. I'm cutting the main yarn there. So 10 stitches. and then back to the main color. So I'm back to the beginning of the row and I'm resetting the stitch counter. I want to do 5 more rows of plain knitting. As I come to the end of each waste yarn, I'm just tugging on it a little bit to make sure I don't drop any stitches. That's 5 more rows complete, and now I'm going to cast off. Now, in the video you can see I accidentally knit a row with the waste yarn. I meant to cast off with the waste yarn, but I will do that once I finish this row. You definitely don't need to knit an extra row with the waste yarn. So you can cast off how you normally cast off. I'm going to just ignore the green yarn and pretend I hadn't done it. When I'm finished casting them all off, I'm going to pull out that extra bit of waste yarn, so it's like it was never there. Okay, so that's it for the machine knitting. I'm just untying the waste yarn from the main yarn from when I first started. So this will be the bottom of your bag. You're going to need a crochet hook, but there's not actually crocheting involved. So you want to start where the 2 ends of your waste yarn are. I'm hooking up the first stitch, and I'm being very careful not to split that waste yarn. You don't want that in your hook. Then I'm going to go to the other side, the bottom of the bag, and take the first stitch from there and pull that through the first loop from the top of the bag. And then I'm just going to alternate. So now I'm hooking up the loop from the top of the bag, and I'm going to pull it through the first loop of the bottom of the bag. And you're just going to do that all the way across to the very end. This is what it looks like after there's about 2 inches done. And again, you want to be very careful not to split that green yarn or you won't be able to pull it out later. This is the very last stitch now, and I'm just going to leave my crochet hook in it so it doesn't unravel. So now you can pull on one end of the waste yarn and it should come all the way out. Now that's the bottom of our bag. And using this crochet hook, this method, we make sure that the bag won't unravel when you pull out the drop stitches. And this is why you need a longer tail when you start. It was so hard to make a knot with this little tiny piece. So I'm just going to stick the end of the yarn inside the bag. Now I realized as I was doing this that it was not a good idea, because when I pull out the drop stitches, you'll be able to see a tail in there. For the other side, I used a piece of scrap yarn, and I'm just going to weave it through that loop and then tie it onto the bag. Now on this side, instead of just sticking the ends of the yarn inside the bag, I'm actually going to weave them into the seam on the bottom. And now the bottom of the bag is complete, and we're going to move on to do the top. For the top, I'm using circular needles. I don't have the size, but I think it's a 4 or 5 millimeter. So you're just going to go around the whole top and pick up all of the stitches. Then you're going to pull out the waste yarn. So for the top, I wanted to do a stretchy cast off. We're going to knit 1 stitch. Wrap the yarn over the needle, knit a 2nd stitch, then slide the first 2 stitches over the 3rd stitch. So it's almost like a normal cast off, except for that yarn over, and the point of the yarn over is to make the cast off way stretchier. The first time I tried making this bag, I used a crochet hook and just did a crochet bind off. It still looked nice, but it wasn't stretchy, and I couldn't fit as big of an item inside. For example, I tried to put in 7 bananas, but I could only fit 4 in through the opening. I'm all the way back to the beginning now, and I'm just going to finish off that last loop. There's a bit of a gap between the last stitch and the first stitch that I cast off. You can see it here. There's a gap. So I'm going to use my yarn needle and kind of wrap the waste yarn around the first stitch to close the gap. So just tie off the end of your yarn and weave in the ends like we did on the bottom of the bag. Alright, so now we have the machine knitting done, the bottom of the bag, and the top of the bag. Here you can see how stretchy the top of the bag is now that it's finished. Compared to a bag without the stretchy cast off, this is just a crochet cast off. You can see how much more stretch there is in the one we just did. Now it's time to finish the handles. I'm using 3.25mm double pointed needles. However, they are way too small. They're just the first ones I see and grabbed. You could probably use size 4 or 5mm needles instead. So I'm picking up all of the stitches on the top of the waist yarn row with one needle. Then I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom of the waist yarn row with a second needle. So you want to be really careful to not hook up any of the waist yarn on your needle because you won't be able to pull it out. Now, when I separate the two rows, I've realized I've dropped a stitch or I missed a stitch. So I'm going to carefully slide the needle out up until that stitch and then pick them all back up again. Just so there are no weird gaps on the side of my handles, I'm going to pick up 2 or 3 stitches on each side. To cast off the handle stitches, we're going to do the same stretchy cast off that we did for the top of the bag. So knit 1 stitch, yarn over, knit a 2nd stitch, and then pull the first 2 stitches over the 3rd stitch. These are the 2 stitches that I picked up on the side, so you're just going to do the exact same way, pretend they're normal. Again, I didn't leave my tail long enough, so I've just got it pinched between my index and middle finger so I don't drop it. Now that I finished the whole bottom row, I'm just going to tie the tail from earlier onto my working yarn so it doesn't unravel. And now I'm going to continue with the top row. That was the last stitch, so I'm going to cut a tail and pull the tail through the very last stitch. So weave in that tail and then repeat on the other side. You can see again how nice and stretchy the handle is. Alright, both handles are completed. So now you can pull out all of your drop stitches.